So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm walking because I'm jet lagged, and if I stand behind the podium, I'm going to fall asleep. How many of you out there have a computer handy right now? All right, I'm going to give you a little challenge in a few minutes. And another question, I know you've heard about ORCID a little bit today. Prior to today, how many of you have heard of ORCID? Yes, okay, great. Okay, so ORCID, what are we? These are some of the questions you will encounter, like my little question person. Why do I keep having to enter data over and over again? It's the same stuff, it's the same papers, it's the same affiliation information. And then I move, and I have to enter it again. For heaven's sakes, this is driving me crazy. Then you have folks in the library, folks in a grant agency who say, are these two names the same person? Maybe we have somebody's record in a grant agency system, another record in a university system, another record in academia.com. Are these all the same people? Or you have two authors in one database and you don't know if they're the same person. And to previous speaker's point, how can we know what our researchers have produced, especially if we can't tell who's who? How do we keep our repository up to date? How can we accurately benchmark? And how can we track people? They leave, we have no idea what they do when they go away. So these are all these questions. At the heart of all of these questions is affiliating and associating individuals with their research works. Okay? And I want to make it very clear that by research works, I don't mean to say just publications. There's a lot of things that researchers do to contribute. Okay, so we're talking more broadly about research works. So what we have been lacking is the ability to form that linkage, clear association between research and researchers. So what is ORCID? ORCID's been around for a little while. We launched last October our registry. What it is a nonprofit, community-driven organization with two pieces of a mission. The first part is to provide an open registry of persistent identifiers for researchers. Researchers register, they keep this identifier, it travels with them wherever they go, persistence, okay? The second piece of this is saying just because you build a registry doesn't mean it has implicit value. What we're really trying very hard to do is work with the entire research community to embed the identifiers in workflows, to embed it in manuscript submission systems, to embed it in the grant application system, to embed it in repositories, et cetera, to embed it in professional society memberships, everywhere we can to say this is this person and this is how they're contributing, okay? So those two pieces. This is my only picture of the interface. So here is the challenge to you. Anyone who has a computer, the poll today is if you don't already have an ORCID identifier, please take about 30 seconds during this talk, because I know you're doing email anyway, to go register. It's orchid.org, and you just click on the register button, and you enter your first name, your last name, your email, password. There's a few pieces down here: default privacy, notification, and acceptance of terms and conditions. It should take you about 30 seconds to register. Orchid.org, ORCID.org. So while you're doing that, I'll continue my talk. So ORCID ID is this entire thing. It's not just the 16-digit number, it's the entire URI. Okay, the idea is if you have the URI exhibited, you can get to that individual's page in ORCID clearly. Okay, we don't just want the number. 16 digits, and it's also compatible with an ISO standard. And I'm more than happy to answer questions, technical questions at the end of this. So benefits to the community, as I mentioned, it's unique, it's persistent, it can be used throughout the career. It improves system interoperability. There's a lot of systems out there, and I've been listening to talks about systems today, and these systems are not talking to each other. ORCID is a piece of the interoperability. DUIs are another piece, and organizational IDs are another piece. We've got to get all of this stuff in. ORCID's focusing on the person part of this, okay? With improved system interoperability, we can, the goal here is to go to reduced reporting workload for researchers, for institutions, for funders. Everybody benefits from this, okay? It can automate repository deposition. If we include the ORCID identifier when a person submits a manuscript or a data set, that can come back to update the ORCID registry, and that can then flow into the repository. A lot less time spent working with individuals, working with messy data sets. You can just grab it straight from the registry. It can also support institutional reporting. And the other piece is that it's an open identifier. The ORCID ID is public. We have posted our code in an open source repository, and our APIs are open. So it's very easy, or straightforward, I should say, to work with the tools. We also have a sandbox for testing. It's free to use. And also really encouraging the community to build applications on top of and consuming data from ORCID. All right, so this is all fine and good to talk about chocolate cake, or lettuce, I guess I would say, salad, but somebody has to eat it, right? So researchers have to see the benefit of creating identifier, and they don't just have to see that, they actually have to go eat the leafy lettuce, okay? They have to create it, and these systems have to embed the identifier. So what I want to do for the next little bit of time is talk about where we are as an organization with adoption in the community, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the APIs, provide some sample workflows for embedding, and then I'm also, if I have time, going to provide a few slides that show how some organizations already have embedded, okay? So just a little progress update. So here's where we are with users. We have 106,000 people who have come to the Orchid Registry one way or another and registered. This is numbers as of last Friday. So how many of you have actually just registered now? Anybody did it? Yes, okay, great. Did it take about 30 seconds? Excellent, okay. So this is people actually coming to register, which is, I'm happy. You can also see it's very international. The US represents about 17–18% of the users on the site. And as you can see, it goes down to a long tail pretty quickly. I've listed the top 15 here. There's a lot of folks at the 1%. There's a huge number of countries that are using this. 11 countries we've had over 10,000 visitors from, 46 with over 1,000, and 87, this is inclusive of the top 2, with at least 100 people who have come to the site. Okay, so there's pretty good international usage. We have steady growth since launch, which is this figure right here, and we've actually seen a fair uptick since the Beyond PDF conference, so thank you, Beyond PDF. We've gone from about 4,000 to 5,000 a week registering to about 8,000 to 9,000 in the past 3 weeks, which is really heartening to see. So, ORCID IDs are being embedded in university CRIS systems. I'm going to show you an example of that, both by the university themselves and by vendors. Okay? In manuscript submission systems, both by the publishers and by vendors. And I'm happy to provide a complete list. I don't have it up here, but there's a number of vendors, and actually all the major vendors, and I would say the vast majority of publishers will have embedded ORCID identifiers by the end of this year into the manuscript submission system. We also have funders that are getting on the boat. Both NIH and Wellcome Trust by the end of this year will have embedded ORCID identifiers into their grant submission systems. And we're just finalizing membership agreements with the Food and Drug Administration in the US and the Department of Energy. And we're also working with funders in Canada and the UK and in EU to work on similar things. Okay, so there's movement in the funding community. We do have some linkage with repositories. Crossref is already there, was one of our early adopters. And also with EBI, who's going to be doing the integration with PubMed Europe. So that should be out sometime later this year. Also working with other large repositories, including Inspire at CERN and others, to make sure that people have the ability to search from within the ORCID interface those repositories and link to their work. Okay? And also linkage with other identifiers. So there's a strong linkage right now between ORCID and researcher ID. You can claim, create, claim ORCID record and pass information between researcher ID and Scopus. And researcher, sorry, between, said that wrong. Between, I said that completely wrong. Between ORCID and researcher ID and between ORCID and Scopus. This is a really great way for an individual to go in, for example, with Scopus, review what the algorithms have done to create clusters and say, yes, this is me, no, this isn't mine, and actually clean up some of those records to support the university evaluations. And actually, in the beginning, when ORCID first launched, we saw a lot of activity from researchers in Spain and Italy, where they have national evaluations coming up. They found out they could clean up their Scopus record and came to the registry very quickly and in large numbers to go in and clean up their Scopus record. So there is a lot of actually awareness in the researcher community about ORCID and how it can be used to support evaluation. We're also talking to a number of member societies, so professional societies, about integrating ORCID identifiers into the membership renewal system at membership societies. All right, so what does this mean? When we look at who's coming to register, about a third of folks coming to register for identifiers are coming from integration sites. Historically, this has been primarily through manuscript submission, but now as universities are starting to integrate and create identifiers for their researchers, I expect that these pies over here are going to change a bit. Okay, so stay tuned. And I'll talk a little bit for the next few minutes about the ORCID registry itself. What does it look like? What's in there? And the APIs. So the ORCID registry has, I guess, 3 basic components. There's the account itself, where you manage account settings and permissions. I'll talk about privacy next. The ORCID record itself, where you can save your biography, so a snippet of text on who you are, and your research activities. Okay? And the identifier then links to other information. We are not a database of free text. This is not what we do. We link. We're a switchboard. Okay? So we link to other identifiers. We link to CRIS systems. We link to workflows. Okay? That's the whole point of ORCID, is to bring down the walls between silos and link it. Okay? Privacy in ORCID, because it's researcher driven, it's very, very important that we pay attention to privacy. So in ORCID, an individual has complete control over display, public display of any item in their record except their identifier. The identifier is always public. They can hide their name, they can hide any other information in there, or they can make anything public. And there's 3 settings. There's public, which everyone can see. There's a limited access, which is share only with those organizations I say this information can be shared with. And private, only myself and my proxy can see this, nobody else. Okay? We have 2 APIs, and I'll talk a little bit more about these APIs, but we have a public API that can be used for searching. There are a number of organizations already using the public API, completely free to use. It allows you to see and search the public data in the ORCID registry. There's also a member API, which allows you, depending on the type of organization you are, to read, create, or append, or read, edit, append, or create ORCID records. Okay? So who do we have in ORCID? We have the individual, we have their proxy, somebody they assign. We have trusted organizations, these are members. And we also have the account owner, which is usually the individual, but can also be the trusted organization when they first create a record. Okay? So this is going to be helpful when we go through these couple use cases. Am I doing on time here? Whew. Okay. Okay, so accessing an ORCID record. So up here we see the scholar from the website. Okay? They can create a record for themselves. They can edit the record, they can add to the record, they can read the record. Okay, all of those things can be done from the website and is completely free. Okay, there's no membership required, no fee required. Proxies assigned by the scholar can edit, add to, or read that scholar's record. Okay, so you can assign your departmental assistant to manage your record for you if you want to. We also have trusted organizations from the API. Okay, can create if they're an employer, edit, add to, or read if they're a trusted organization. Okay? Now, if they're a trusted organization, to read to this scholar has to have said it's okay. Every single transaction we do, so for example, when an individual decides they want to link their ORCID record to their researcher ID record, the researcher has to okay that explicitly in the transaction, okay? So it's not just something that happens, you have to say it's okay. It comes back to privacy and handling of privacy in the record. So this is the basic, how do we access the records? Case study number 1 for a research organization. They're going to create an identifier for an employee. They will then send an email to the employee saying, hey, we've done this for you, please claim it. Okay? And then that individual can set privacy levels and also establish a trust relationship with their employer. And then this trusted organization can now add activities or receive updated information, for example, for updating the repository from the ORCID registry using the API. Okay? So this is kind of the create mode for research organizations. Case study number 2, this is for non-employers, but employers could do it too. A member site can say, could I write to your record? This could be as simple as in the manuscript submission system, setting up a trust relationship with the person submitting a manuscript, okay? Asking permissions, now it's possible for you to now write back to the record if you're given that permission. Scholar reviews it, establishes a relationship, and now the member site becomes trusted. It may add activities, and perhaps more important for this audience, receive record updates. Okay, all of this through the API. All right, I'm going to give you, I have a few minutes left, example workflows. A couple slides just showing you examples. I was just in another session where they put together a 4-page document describing a standard and then 61 pages of examples. So here's my 4 pages of examples. Sometimes the pictures are really helpful. So 4 examples showing how one system, a CRIS system, has linked to ORCID. Another showing actually text about a manuscript submission system embedding the ORCID identifier. A third about linking to an external ID. And then finally, an altmetric site that's consuming data from ORCID to generate metrics. So this is the Aveda system. What they have done is to make it possible for you to register for an ORCID in their interface, capture that ID, and then display it in their profile interface. There are other vendors doing this as well. Boston University is doing this with their Boston Profile system, and I know Symplectic is starting to work on this as well. The other nice thing that Avedis has done is also make it possible, using your ORCID identifier, to search for publications and bring those publications into your local record, or vice versa. Okay? So this is a way, again, to break down the barriers across systems, reduce the workload for individuals when they're managing their local profile. And the other nice thing about this is, well, if Torsten leaves and goes to another university, their information's all in their ORCID record, and they can do the same thing without having to type it in again. Yay! So that's your CRIS system. I guess I should go back. From the point of view of the institution, they now have this information and can use it for their reporting requirements. This is great. This individual can also use this information when they submit a grant or are doing reporting on a grant. Anything that's supported in this CRIS system can also be used to pass information back and forth. And as their ORCID record is updated with new publication information, that can also come back into this system, much less typing. Okay? Second, Nature was one of our early adopters. They have integrated ORCID into their manuscript submission system for corresponding authors, working on it for everyone else. And so what was really nice, there was an editorial that came out at the beginning of this year. Nature journal authors can link their ORCID to their account, okay, which can be done. And they're planning to be publishing author ORCIDs in the papers. Okay? So again, this is a note to researchers to say, pay attention, this is going to be important. Your ORCID identifier is going to be part of who you are as a researcher. It's going to be in your papers. Okay? And I know there's a whole conversation around how to display, where to display in manuscripts. I don't need to digress into that now, but you know, these are also conversations we need to have. But it is happening. The other nice thing about this, Hindawi, others are starting to pass, they're starting to see ORCID identifiers coming with metadata back into Crossref. So now you start to see the circle coming around, and then Crossref can then send an alert to the individual. Do you want to update your ORCID record? Yes, and boom, it goes. So now we see all of it coming together. And finally, linking to other identifiers. So this shows the researcher ID workflow. In researcher ID, I would like to create an ORCID, or I already have one, establishing the linkage. And then over here, you can exchange profile data, so your biography, or you can also send your publications to my ORCID account, or I can retrieve ORCID publications into my researcher ID account. The other nice thing that happens here is that your researcher ID number and your ORCID ID now become associated. That researcher ID number can be displayed in your ORCID record, and the ORCID ID can be displayed on your researcher ID record. Great, okay? You don't have to worry about, is this ID here and this ID here the same? We know it's the same because they're both displayed. All right, that is essentially the end of my, oh, I have one more, sorry, one more. Impact story. So this is one of several altmetric site. They're actually using the public API. You can enter your ORCID identifier. So this is mine. they pull down the article metadata and will actually run their algorithms on that metadata and determine usage for your articles, which is kind of fun. I think it goes back to how valuable are these. We'll find out in due course of time, but you can generate them very, very easily just using information from your record. You can imagine a number of other sites doing the same thing straight from a CRIS or straight from the Orchid Registry. So, roadmap. There's a lot of stuff happening this year. This should say 2013. I don't know why it says 2012. I have a gremlin in my slides. So there's a few things happening. We just hired a new director of community. So there's going to be a lot more outreach activities. You'll see us at researcher meetings, engaging. We're going to be developing materials for integrators more extensive than we have now. We'll have an integrator page on the website that shows you what people are doing. So this will all be rolling out this year. A piece of this is an ambassador program. If any of you are interested in being an ambassador to your community, please come talk to me. And we'll chat about what that means. We published our, as I mentioned, we published our code and open source repository. We have a Code Fest coming up in May in Oxford. And we'll have a second one in collaboration with the Odin Project in October. Things that are coming out from a, I don't know if any of you went on the site on April 1st. We had a proof of concept of translation. The whole site was translated into ORC. Can you imagine a whole language? I didn't think they could get like research evaluation in ORC, but apparently it's in the language. So what we're going to be doing this year is supporting multi-language on the site. So you'll start to see other languages, Spanish, French, and Chinese, the two forms of Chinese, to interact with a number of both the registry and some of the about pages on the site. So really trying to provide support in the community for people to understand the benefit of using ORCID. Other things we're doing, multiple email just launched about a week ago. So if you go and register, you can enhance your record by putting a number of emails in there, both past and current, so that can help you identify past papers, for example, using that email. Coming soon, this summer, we'll have affiliations module coming out. So you'll be able to, as an individual, link to your where you work or where you have worked in the past, as well as grants, information, and patents in Q3. Cross-linking works, a bunch of other things, and then hopefully by Q4 we're going to start working on things like fun stuff like adding pictures, inviting other people, and linking to, pardon me, linking to your co-authors. So lots of stuff happening. We are an open, community-driven organization. We have a number of working groups. On every page of the register of the site, you'll see, please, if you have ideas, please submit ideas straight to us. We pay attention to what you guys want. One of the features that came out this year on that page I showed you before was the ability to, at the time of registration, set all of your works as public. So when you import something into the site, it comes in and is displayed by default as public. That was a researcher requested feature. So if it's something that you want us to do, please let us know. Let us know if you'd like to serve on a working group. Happy to have you. So that's all I have to say. Here's information. That's me. And we're at orchid.org on Twitter. We also have a blog. So thank you very much.